Welcome to episode 65 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on August 4th, 2021. I have an interview for you today with Tracey Hawkins, who is one of the volunteers working to put together virtual Shetland Wool Week for us this year. We had a lovely chat about the history of Shetland Wool Week and a bit of a glimpse of what's to come this year. I really enjoyed my chat with her, and I hope you will too. I'm going to work the episode a little backwards this time. I have some quick reminders at the top of the show to make sure you don't miss them, and then we will get into the interview. First thing, patrons, because of some shifting of travel plans, I needed to move the last online knitting date for August to the 24th instead of the 31st, so please note that. Second, the Makkin Our Way Through Shetland tours are filling up steadily. The Fair Isle weeks are currently full, but if you have an interest in doing a Fair Isle week in August of 2022, please contact Jolene at info@islandvista.co.uk and let her know. If we have enough interest within the next few months, we will add a second Fair Isle week in August. The Lace Week in August only has one room left, while the May Lace Week has 4 rooms left. I say rooms instead of spaces because some of the rooms are doubles and the number of people is actually limited by the number of rooms we use, though we are hard capping each tour to 12 people, counting me. So if you and a buddy want to join in on August Lace Week and you're willing to share a room, that's totally possible. I'm actually headed to Shetland at the end of this month for a special project, and I am getting all giddy about it as I have been planning. It really is just such a lovely place. The people are great. The opportunities to learn about knitting are fantastic. The food is amazingly good. I really am looking forward to traveling with those of you who can make it on the tours next year. I'm always there on my own or with my husband, and he doesn't appreciate the knitting side of Shetland as much as I do. So it will be a real treat for me to experience it with people who are as nerdy about this stuff as I am. Find out more about the tours by visiting ithoughtIknewhow.com/Shetland. Third, a reminder, I am teaching a class during virtual Shetland Wool Week this year in partnership with Viveka Velupillai from Uredale Yarn. It's another version of the Makkin and Shetland Dialect class that we did recently. The project is a set of fingerless mitts designed by Hilly Vandersloos using Uredale yarn, and it is really designed for Fair Isle newbies. If you have knit a Harriet's hat or a Shetland Wool Week hat or any other Fair Isle project before, you will likely be too advanced for the knitting information I will be teaching in this class. If, however, you would like to take the class so you can hear Viveka's presentation about the development of the Shetland dialect and specific knitting terms and dialect that are still in common usage, and about the sustainable practices employed at Uredale Farm to produce their organic yarns, you are, of course, still welcome to join in. I will put a link in the show notes to the registration page for the classes. We're running the classes as two 2-hour sessions on September 27th and 30th, so that you have some time to do some knitting in between the lessons. Both classes will start at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I will put a link in the show notes to the registration page for the class. I strongly recommend that you order the kit for the class so you can knit the Fair Isle and Shetland yarn from Uredale and get the complete experience from the class. And so I recommend that you register quickly because you will need time for the kit to arrive. Uredale is hosting 3 other virtual classes, 2 on natural dyeing with Maria Muscarella and 1 on thrummed mittens with Helene Dreisen. Be sure to have a look at those 2 and see if they interest you and the times work for you. Very quickly, the day after this episode goes live is the start of the I-91 shop hop that we traveled together virtually over the last 3 weeks. Be sure to stop in at Knit New Haven and thank Linda for sponsoring the podcast. Check out the Clinton Hill Cashmere while you are there. It is an ultimate treat yourself yarn. And remember that October 15th is Open Farm Day at Morehouse Farm. The Atlantis Tunic Knit Along has started for that in the Morehouse Merino flock group. If you buy the kit of yarn from Morehouse for this project, you get access to all of the classes to help you knit the Atlantis tunic for free. So it's a great way to dip your toes into the group and see if it's a good fit for you. I will put a link in the show notes for that. Let's have a song break. When the song ends, we can hop right into the interview with Tracey Hawkins, who is helping to organize the virtual offerings for Shetland Wool Week this year. This is really a great opportunity to get into some classes with some brilliant teachers without having to hop on a plane. I feel like I've played this song for you in the past, but I didn't have it marked as being used. It's country. I need to get my country in while the summer is here. This is Zac Nelson with Beautiful. See you on the other side with Tracey Hawkins.
You should change your name to laughter. You bring joy to every room. All the voices vanish after hearing such a lovely tune. In a world that's so imperfect, every word you say is music. You should change your name to beautiful. You should change your name to good. You make tears impossible. I wish that I could have you with me every time I fall. In a world that's so imperfect, I know you will try to fix it. You should change your name to beautiful. I don't think you'd mind it if I change your name to something new. Would you think it childish if I changed my name to I love you? We both have a love so perfect, I would never want to hurt it. You should change your name to beautiful. You should change your name to beautiful. Oh, you should change your name to beautiful.
Tracey, thank you for being with me today. I know that Wool Week is a project that's run by the Shetland Amenity Trust. Can you explain what the Amenity Trust does?
Yes. Well, the Amenity Trust in Shetland has been in operation since 1983, and it is an organisation that works hard to care for Shetland's natural and cultural heritage. So we deliver a wide range of initiatives to safeguard Shetland's heritage and also to ensure that that heritage is accessible and that people can come and engage with and really learn from and enjoy Shetland and all the kind of heritage and historical elements that come into it. Now, Shetland wool is a world-class natural fibre, as probably everybody listening is aware of. It has a long-standing reputation for quality, and Shetland knitwear is also worldwide known and has really stood out as a leading industry within Shetland for many, many years. And it really forms part of Shetland's intangible cultural heritage. And so Shetland Amenity Trust are really keen that we capture and protect that intangible cultural heritage. And so that's kind of how Wool Week has evolved into the current celebration of all things woolly, and in the last year has last 10 years, has gained that worldwide reputation as being a really interesting and exciting event celebrating Shetland wool and Shetland knitwear.
You mentioned 10 years. I feel like that was 2019. We're at 12 years now,
Well,
right? Like
yeah.
COVID time has just collapsed everything.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. I guess we've had 10 festivals,
Right.
but yes, we are in the 12th, 13th year of Shetland Wool Week being an entity as such. And Shetland Amenity Trust helped to arrange the very first Wool Week back in October 2010 and have been involved ever since in that process. The first Shetland Wool Week took place in 2010, as we said, and it was actually a consequence of a kind of larger campaign that was launched or spearheaded, in fact, by His Royal Highness Prince Charles, or the Prince of Wales. And he spearheaded a campaign to try and bolster the international reputation of British wool and the British wool industry. And part to that was he worked with different wool producers within Britain to try and just really reinforce the industry and try and big up and promote and just really get enthusiasm back into British wool. And part of that was through Jamieson and Smith, the wool brokers here in Shetland, whose parent company was based down in England and had close connections with the campaign. And so it was quite logical, really, that Shetland would be one of the host nations for a series of Wool Week events that happened across the UK in 2010. So the first Wool Week happened in October 2010, and it really was just quite a small programme of knitting and some felting classes, and was run in association with the Amenity Trust and Shetland Museum and Archives. So that's kind of how Shetland Amenity Trust became involved in the festival.
And was that just a one-day event when it first happened?
It was certainly much smaller. There was a series of events over the period of time that it ran, but it's much more concentrated than the event we have today. And actually, I always kind of chuckle to myself when we speak about Wool Week, because now it's 9 days. So it's very much an extended week, but we refer to it as the week, although it is kind of longer period of time now. And over the years, that festival has just kept growing and has continued to grow. We participants come in from all over the world, and quite often we get repeat visitors. So they'll come 1 year and then maybe the next, or a few years break and come back. And quite often you'll hear participants that are coming back because they've met up with people through Wool Week and forged friendships, and then want to come back and visit together and experience Wool Week together. And I think that's one of the things that makes Shetland Wool Week a really unique event, is there's a real social community side to the 9 days, the week, that you possibly don't capture elsewhere in a kind of much bigger event or a bigger festival. And a lot of the time, the events that run as part of Wool Week are supported by other community events. We have a phenomenon in Shetland known as Sunday Teas, where a local community will put on a sort of feast of sandwiches and fancy cakes and scones and pancakes and all this, and visitors love going to the Sunday Teas, and they can just sit around with endless cups of tea and coffee and lots of lovely things to eat, and then just catch up with people they've met through previous Wool Weeks, or maybe now through the online knitting communities that are out there.
What is the in-person event like now?
Each year we try to provide a huge variety of classes and workshops, talks and tours. That's the kind of 4 main themes that all the events are based around. We have huge support for the community, and without them Wool Week wouldn't happen, because it opens up a lot of the talents and the skills that we don't necessarily see every day in Shetland life behind kind of closed doors. But for that week, 1 week of the year, then everybody comes out and joins in and makes it a real community event. And I think one of the reasons it's been so successful is as it's continued to grow, it's opened up opportunities to be able to go and do a croft tour. So you can go out to an actual working croft, and a croft is what we would call a small farm, or it might be a mix of animal husbandry and also crops, arable farming. And that's a croft. And what we've seen are the years of Wool Week developing is that lots more of the crofters here are looking again to raise native breeds of Shetland sheep. So a visitor can come and go and meet one of the crofters, again, a member of the community that is doing this either for a living or as a hobby, and they're looking at sustainable ways to raise Shetland sheep in the kind of native climate, and particularly focusing on things like environmental impact and kind of the long-term future of the breed. And then you can the next day go to maybe a workshop on how to dye the fleece and the wool that's come off from that native breed sheep that you visited the day before. And then the next day you might be able to go to a talk on that whole process from one of the actual wool, the industrial manufacture process here in Shetland, a tour of the woolen mills or the wool brokers. And then you might be able to at night go to a class and learn how to knit with that particular fleece that you've dyed and spun and everything. So the whole sort of ethos behind Shetland Wool Week is really that fleece to end products, or sheep to shelf as sometimes we call it, and really an immersive way of learning all about native breeds and how that impacts on the quality of the wool that's produced, how natural techniques for dyeing and spinning are used, and then that kind of how we then put that into practice in knitting a garment or just something lovely and woolly. And so I think that whole experience is really immersive, and it's been exciting over the last few years to see smaller wool producers gaining confidence and coming up through. So we have lots of smaller wool producers within Shetland. So as Shetland Handspun, we have Uredale yarns, and kind of more recently we have Langsund, Easter, Laxdale yarns, Fuller Wool, and it's just they've joined in with the bigger producers of Jamieson and Smith and Jamieson's of Shetland to kind of have even more to celebrate in terms of Shetland wool. The event also allows participants to embrace that expert tutelage here in Shetland through quite small, intimate classes that take place in various locations across Shetland. So not just all focused within Lerwick, which is the main town, the kind of central point for a lot of events. And again, that's a real element of something that people want when they come to Shetland Wool, because they want to see Lerwick and see all the sights of the main town, but they want to go out and see the rest of Shetland as well and experience kind of real Shetland life and all that comes with that, the weather, the scenery, the wildlife. And we also have this amazing group of tutors beyond the kind of wool-based craft. We offer classes in things like woodworking and jewellery making. We've had photography classes before, and they all tend to have some kind of a sheep or wool or knitting focus, but it just kind of shows the breadth, the talent, and the breadth, the expertise that is within Shetland. And then lots of our visitors as well will indulge in other activities kind of out with the official Shetland Wool Week programme, things like bird watching, sampling some nice seafood for some of the restaurants here, maybe some local beer or gin. And so there's a real it is like a festival experience. So you get a lot of little bits that you can pick and choose from and get this whole kind of Shetland experience with being here. So Shetland Wool Week has really evolved to be an event which is not just about shining a spotlight on hand knitting techniques or on the wool itself, but also on the fleece, the kind of the processes there, but spinning and dyeing. We also look into weaving and lots of other traditional crafts as well.
Yeah, I think people, at least within, like people who are listeners of the podcast and things, we think of Shetland as being this destination for knitting and woolen crafts and stuff. And then we get there. And as you said, you realize how much more Shetland has to offer, culturally, historically, all the other artists that are working up there in different genres. It's really, there's so much to experience on Shetland. It's such a small place geographically and population wise, but you could spend a month or more there and still not feel like you've done everything that there is to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we do get so many repeat visitors coming up for Wool Week, either each year or maybe, as I say, every couple of years, because they feel they don't have the time to do everything while they're here for the week. Or I think quite often what happens is folk will book up to come for Wool Week and book classes and talks and workshops every single day, so that they're doing something morning, noon and night, and then they get to the end of the time and think, but I never really saw anything beyond that. And okay, yeah, they're maybe going out for a croft tour in various places in Shetland, or doing a workshop up in Unst, and then being in, which is the island right at the very top of Shetland, as far north as you can go in the UK, but then suddenly realizing that they just went for that event and then came home again and didn't actually explore the territory and look at, I mean, there's a bird reservation up there, one of the kind of best known ones in the country, and people always say, oh, I wish I'd had a whole day to go and explore that as well as doing the class. So they'll come back the next year, and maybe do a bit more of a mix, so do a bit more sightseeing as well as the classes for Wool Week. But that really adds something to the whole event as well, because the visitors are getting out into the community and they're giving something to the community as well. And we've seen lots of kind of smaller independent artisans and craftspeople coming up and wanting to share what they do with the visitors that are here for Wool Week, because they've had such a good response for the visitors that come year on year and really promote Shetland. We're so lucky to have the woolies, as they're kind of sometimes locally known as, that come here and really do an amazing job of promoting Shetland when they go back to wherever it is they've come from. And over the years, I think 2019, we had visitors for all 7 continents came to the physical Wool Week event, and that's just incredible.
Each year there's a patron chosen for the event. Do you have any insight you can offer on how the decision is made as to who's going to be the patron that year?
There is a committee, so it is a committee decision, and it's all top secret. It's very, very secret, so I don't know. I cannot shed any light onto that, I'm afraid. But what I do know is we've been incredibly lucky to have a fabulous selection of patrons over the last, 12 years, we'll say, but certainly over the last of the physical events. And we have the fabulous Will Malcolmson is our patron for 2020 and 2021. So it's amazing to have her at the helm at the moment. The first patron was Kate Davies, and she is really well known as a knitwear designer, a researcher, a writer, and an ambassador really for Shetland and Shetland knitwear. And her enthusiasm and her expertise, and really just the support that she put behind the event, that was a very, very kind of fledgling event at the time, the very first Shetland Wool Week, really catapulted the festival to a much wider audience, and proved to be really successful to have that patron at the helm. The list of patrons is really incredible, and continuing it through the years. Just to name a few, we've had Hazel Tyndall, fastest knitter in the world, has been a patron. We've also had Elizabeth Johnson and Gudrun Johnson, and of course we have Wilma Malcolmson this year, who is, I'm not quite sure, notorious the right word, but she is holding that crown for 2 years, so she's a record holder in terms of being the Wool Week patron. But yes, we're incredibly lucky to have had them, and they do such an amazing job to help Wool Week become the event and the kind of inclusive event that it is.
And one of the things that they're responsible for is creating a hat to help promote the event and sort of build the community and excitement about Wool Week ahead of time. Do they receive any guidance as they are designing, or is that something where it's just like, okay, this is your time to come up with something and they're left to their own devices?
Yes, they're very much left to their own devices. There's, I guess, really the only brief would be it's to be something that's personal to them, and quite often it does have a very personal story behind the inspiration of the design. We, as the Shetland Amenity Trust, as an organizer, we don't have any kind of input or suggestions for that, but just for them to really make a design that means something to them, but is attractive and you kind of utilizes all Shetland has to offer in terms of the yarn and the garment itself. So using the patterns, traditional motifs, or using that as an inspiration to design a completely new and contemporary motif. So really it's so exciting to see what the Patron comes up with as their design, and they've all been so different and amazing. I just love seeing the range that the hats have had over the years, the caps quite often as they are known, and we love seeing all the different colorways that visitors come up with as well. So the people that download that pattern and want to make the hat pattern each year, it's amazing to see all the different colorways and kind of wee quirks and designs. Maybe somebody's added a pom-pom or straps under the neck and things like that. And it's lovely to see the not challenging designs, but how they take that design that the Patron has put out there and said, oh, I'm just going to make this up my own, because that's actually what Wool Week should be about, is about inspiring folk to try their own thing and to use techniques and skills that they can learn about through Wool Week classes, but then put their own mark onto it. And I recently spoke with the current patron, Wilma Malcolmson, and she's had quite a lot of feedback about last year's hat, Katie's Cap, which was inspired by her mother, and sort of who had helped her to learn to knit. I think a lot of the motifs used in Katie's Cap were the motifs that her mum really loved to knit. And so Wilma incorporated them into her design. And she said lots of feedback for folks saying that Katie's Cap is actually the first Fair Isle project that they've tried. So that's the first, it's getting folk into knitting Fair Isle. And then they love the pattern so much that they've actually become hooked on trying to find different colorways to make it work, and putting their own kind of slant onto Wilma's design. And then Wilma has also done a new hat pattern for 2021 called the Crofter's Cap, and that was inspired by her father. So there's a really lovely story behind the two caps that she's designing. They go so nicely together, and I think feedback Wilma herself is that she loves seeing on social media all the different colorways and all the different war folker that are knitting them, and and that's the beauty of social media, is you can have somebody posting a photo of New Zealand right up to Alaska and beyond, and it's so amazing to see that, and that kind of community that the hat pattern and the hat has created through Wool Week. I think 2018, it was sort of front page news in the local paper here, the Shetland Times, that just comes out once a week, a photo of the opening ceremony and everybody that was visiting in their Wool Week hat. And it's just brilliant to see that. And it's almost a bit of a trademark. So if you see somebody in a Wool Week hat, you can go and have a chat with them about Wool Week or knitting or something. So it's almost like wearing a badge to say, I'm a knitter, so come and say hello. And I think that's something that, again, is quite unique within Shetland Wool Week, because when you come and attend the event here, you're probably going to bump into somebody on the street that's also here for the event. And so you can just strike up that conversation. And the hat kind of represents a membership almost to a kind of elite group, or maybe no elite group, but a group that shares that common interest.
Yeah, that's very true. That's, I noticed that as well, as you're, walking through town or out and about anywhere, you see the hat and you're like, oh, they're here too for the.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite yourself of the 8 that have been created so far?
Ooh, that is quite a tricky question. I mean, they're all amazing. So, and I have to say, I'm very much an appreciator of knit, where my knitting skill is quite low, low level. I love to knit, but I'm not brilliant at it. And every year I said, right, I'm going to go to some Wool Week classes, and then I never actually managed because it's too busy getting behind the scenes. But so I'm very much a knitting enthusiast and appreciator. But I think the Babel hat by Donna Smith, and that was the hat that featured in the 2015 Shetland Wool Week. That was the Shetland Wool Week 2015 hat, and it has a design with sheep, so it's Babel hat, and it has a bauble or a pom-pom on the top. And I just love that one because it's so instantly recognizable that you can almost kind of play a game to try and you think, is that a Babel hat? Yes, it is. And that's that kind of way. I've been on holiday before and been able to identify a Babel hat in the distance. hands. So I think just for that instantly recognizable sign of a wool weaker or somebody that's really into their knitting, it's you can just see it with the babble hats, just encompasses it all for me.
I think that one has traveled the farthest and been most popular of the wool week hats. I was going up an escalator, in Massachusetts, going up the escalator in a mall, and I looked down into the food court and there was a teenage boy wearing a bobble hat. And I was like, wait a minute.
It's amazing, isn't it, really, to think? And I think social media has had a huge impact, of course, with that, but certainly Donna Smith's design in 2015 was the first one to sort of almost go viral and create this real momentum behind Shetland Wool Week hats. And I think it's a really accessible design as well. As I say, my level of knitting isn't great, but this is something I can achieve, and I think that's a really nice way to start off somebody's journey and introducing them into Wool Week. And then as their confidence grows, then they might get involved in maybe doing more kind of ambitious projects than they maybe would have done before. So, and Katie's Kep is proven, as I say, that's what Wilma is here, and that's the same type idea. It's a Kep that encourages people to just give it a go and really try their hand at maybe a knitting technique that they haven't done before.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the brilliant things about the hat is that there is all that support online. So I know I actually, the first time I went to Shetland, I was a knitter, but I hadn't done any Fair Isle knitting. I didn't know anything about Shetland. I just knew as a knitter, if I was going to be in Scotland, I should take a few days and go up to Shetland. So I picked up some yarn and found one of the Shetland Wool Week annuals, and I started knitting a scarf in the round that I believe was a Marie Wallin pattern. And I had to restart it 3 times, and my tension was all over the place. And I was shy about asking online for help or asking someone for help. But the wonderful thing about the Wool Week hats is that everybody's knitting them. And there's groups on Facebook, and people start doing knit-alongs with their group of friends, and yarn storms are doing it. And so there is all that support to get you through. And as you said, it's a wonderful entryway into Fair Isle as a whole. So having finished some of the Wool Week hats and the Harriet's hat, my Fair Isle has gone a little crazy as far as, it's sort of taken over the other techniques that I enjoy too. And every now and then I have to say, okay, let's not do Fair Isle for the next one. Let's, work on a different skill for a bit, and then we can come back to it. It's my candy now. But I think they've been wonderful for being that entry point for people.
Yes, definitely. And as you said, that social side, the knit-alongs and getting that support, whether it is online, maybe after the event. So, coming here with your hat that you have made and maybe being a bit shy wearing it because there's, you're in a room with 50 other amazing knitters, and you think, oh, I'm not sure if mine is good enough, to actually going away at the end of the week and thinking, no, I'm going to wear this with pride, because Fair Isle isn't it easy to knit, and you maybe did have to start it a couple of times, but actually it's so almost addictive, and I think that way of getting support for other knitters and online and having those knit-alongs is such a good thing. And particularly in the situation that we've been in for the past kind of year and a half. And we're seeing a huge increase, even within Shetland, in the number of folk that have sort of taken up knitting again, because they've had time during lockdown, or they've needed something as a kind of stress reliever. And so it's really encouraging to see, even within kind of small community here, about more folks starting to knit, but also through social media channels, you're seeing that impact in a kind of wider environment as well. So across the UK and across the world. And I think the Wool Week hat is a really accessible pattern that folk are picking up and having a go at. And it's having a hugely beneficial impact on their lives.
Yeah. So even if you can't attend the event, the Wool Week hats are a great way to feel like part of the experience. But then there's also the Shetland Wool Week annual that's published every year that you can get sort of once the event started, that becomes available to people to order. And it includes information about Shetland textiles and wool, and has stuff for knitters, crocheters, and weavers generally. There's generally something for everybody at this point. When did that become part of the Wool Week experience?
So the first annual was produced to accompany the 2016 event. So kind of Shetland Wool Week 2016 and the annual accompanied that year. And it is a fabulous publication for all knitters and non-knitters, I have to say, but who, like myself, who just like looking and aspiring to be one of those folk that can knit for the annual. But no, it's a really lovely publication that, as well as the patterns, has really interesting articles and amazing photography, kind of showing Shetland at its best. And that's something that captures Shetland across the year, rather than if you're a visitor and you're just coming during Wool Week, you're seeing Shetland in that kind of late autumn, coming into our kind of harsher climate, winter climate, and there's not so much colour in the land, the flowers are all gone and things like that. So I think the annual's a really nice way to kind of connect to Shetland through the seasons in a kind of wool and knitting context. But as you say, not all just knit or hand knit, but we're also sometimes will feature patterns for machine knitters or crocheting, weaving, and looking at kind of behind the scenes with designers and how their processes work and things like that as well. So it's actually a really interesting read beyond. So even if you're no knitter, it's a nice annual or almost like a coffee table book to just have and pick up and look through and kind of just feel paired to the community here in Shetland.
How does that come together every year? Are people invited to submit articles and patterns, or is that, feelers are put out to people who are involved already with Wool Week and they're, whoever's interested send something? How does that work? I'm just curious.
It's a bit of a mix, to be honest. So it's pretty much as soon as this current year's annual goes to print, then the editor starts the process for the next year, and she is really keen on new approaches, looking for new techniques, new kind of fashions or styles or trends, and so really kind of keeps an eye on what's happening in the world of everything wool related, and tries to offer a variety of projects for folks. So there is a kind of it's not just all expert knitters that can use the annual as for patterns and things. So it's having that really good mix within it. So I think she's always open to offers of interest. There's the Wool Week email address that you could always drop a wee line to and send a note of interest for being included or having a pattern included in the annual. The idea behind it is to really produce something that is beautifully showing Shetland at its best, but also supporting the local designers and knitters in getting kind of their patterns out there and sort of promoting knitwear and Shetland in to a wider audience.
Obviously, last year, COVID took us all by surprise, and it wasn't canceled. Wool Week wasn't canceled, but it was shifted to an online event. And many of the people and companies that are typically involved with the Shetland Wool Week did some pre-recorded events, classes and interviews and things for people, much of which is still available, actually. So if you didn't know about that or you didn't have a chance, you can find those on YouTube. How was all of that received?
Oh, it was amazing, actually. I mean, I wasn't involved at the time, but the team behind it put their heads together quite late on, to be honest. I think they had realised when the event was cancelled, sort of in the spring of the year, that we weren't really sure if we could offer an online event because it's such a unique situation with Shetland Wool Week. Like, how do you capture that essence of Shetland Wool Week, all the community events, all the interactions? And they really weren't sure whether that could happen, that you could have a sort of an online version. But I think kind of come nearer what would have been the physical event, they realised no, they really needed to put something out there for folk to enjoy, and it was received so well. I mean, I think the feeds that went live through all our kind of social media channels and YouTube, with tens of thousands of views of that content. So thousands and thousands of people were participating in the online Wool Week event. All over the world, and actually the feedback for it was amazing, and folk took time to get in touch and say thank you for doing this, because it had just had a really positive effect on them at a time that they really needed something to kind of lift them up and give them a bit of hope, or give them a new project to kind of think about and maybe distract from what else was happening at the time. So yes, it really did help to keep that feeling of community going for the Wool Week audience, but also had individually had a positive impact on people's kind of emotional and maybe physical well-being as well at a really, really difficult time. And so this year we are going to have a virtual online event again and kind of build on that success for last year, and hopefully have some familiar faces in there that folk can kind of feel connected again with Shetland, and then some new faces coming through as well, and new talents. So hopefully try and capture that kind of essence of what Shetland Wool Week is in its physical form, but in the virtual realm.
So can you give us sort of any previews or give us a hint at what's to come for this year's Wool Week?
So we're currently still putting the program together. Actually, we're still working hard behind the scenes to pull that program together. But it will be a kind of mixture of content. So we'll have some pre-recorded video content. We'll have interactive classes and workshops. They will be ticketed in limited spaces on those, but we're working with a number of third parties to provide as many kind of spaces and availability as we possibly can do, and we hope to have the programme confirmed kind of mid to late August, so not too far in the future. We tickets going on sale probably the end of August into September. I'm not trying to be coy and no let you in on any details, but really we are just still finalising things at the minute. But as I say, lots of familiar faces popping up in there, lots of Wool Week favourites, and then yes, some new faces as well, which will be exciting for everybody to meet. And we'll have lots of, we'll try and capture that essence of Shetland Wool Week, but it will be a slightly different festival this year. But one of the benefits we hope is that it kind of opens it up to a wider audience, so people that can't necessarily travel to Shetland, or having to take 2 weeks off your work to come to a tiny island in the middle of nowhere is not always practical, and so hopefully the online event this year will kind of reach an even wider audience across the globe.
So if they are interested, where should people keep their eyes if they want to be updated on what's coming?
Yeah, so as I say, we're still kind of working on that program, so it is very much ongoing at the moment, but it's been quite a challenge because it's so different to organising the physical event. The physical event is a challenge to organise as well, but it's just trying to get your head around how virtual works. So really the best way to keep up to date with what's happening and when kind of more details will be announced is to either sign up to the Shetland Wool Week newsletter through the Shetland Wool Week website. So just through your search engine in your browser, just type in Shetland Wool Week. You'll find our website and you can sign up for the newsletter, or through the social media channels. So we have an Instagram, a Facebook presence. So just search Shetland Wool Week and like or follow or sign up to the newsletter, and then you'll be kept up to date with all the developments as they happen.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tracey, so much for taking the time to talk to us and get us updated on what's to come and some of the history of Shetland Wool Week. I really appreciate it.
That's great. Thanks so much, Anne. It's been excellent fun. I've really enjoyed it.
Really, thank you, Tracey. I know you are super busy planning Shetland Wool Week at the moment, so I'm very grateful that you took the time to chat. Everyone, go over to shetlandwoolweek.com and get on the mailing list if you haven't already. This marks the end of our weekly episodes. We are going back to every 2 weeks after this, so I will see you in 2 weeks. In the meantime, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you'd like to support the show, please visit patreon.com/I-thought-I-knew-how to make a monthly pledge. You may also consider making a purchase from one of our sponsors by visiting the website I-thought-I-knew-how.com and clicking the link at the top that says Be a Booster. While you are on the site, you can also find the show notes for each episode. Thank you ever so much to my patrons, to Knit New Haven, and to Morehouse Farm for sponsoring the podcast. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on Twitter, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.